Get some over.
Going to call this meeting to order. We have a quorum. We're missing a couple tonight, but we have a quorum tonight. I'd like to get our agenda.
Madam President, make a motion for the agenda.
I second.
All in favor with a show of hands. I would like to thank you all for being here tonight. It's our second budget meetings, which are required, and usually talk about good things in our schools before I start a meeting. I'd like to talk about something the board has done, because I have in my hand a plaque by it's the Alabama State School Boards, and the school board member training award that this board has won for all of the hard work they have done, demonstrating excellence in education through boardmanship training. We've done some wonderful training here. It's nice to be ready. I would also just briefly like to that Dr. Moore and Ms. Mitchell and I spent a little bit of time this afternoon at the State Board of Education at their most recent meeting. And the reason we were there was to discuss the ending of intervention. It was a very, very good meeting, very positive, and I encouraged that we would soon see the Montgomery Public being under intervention. I'm going to turn over to Ms. Watts to talk about budget.
Has had and retained that 1 month fund balance over the last couple of years. The district has also met other mandates by the state, timely budget submittals on time, and we also present monthly financial statements to the board, and of course we post those financial statements on our website. The district has also placed all of its local school accounts at one bank. Previously, out of our 52 schools, the principals could decide which bank he or she wanted to bank at. So you can imagine the type of concerns we had as it relates to oversight. Well, we decided to consolidate that and use one bank, and that way management in the finance department could also review to see what's going on in those accounts. So it provides a great oversight opportunity for the district, and we know what to expect as it relates to those various school accounts. The district has also started the implementation of an online payment method, and we have a lot of parents who are very, very excited about that. It's an opportunity for parents, instead of them sending monies by their children or donating money and have to send it to their children, or them driving the money, driving up to the school, they can do it electronically now. They can just call from their home to make the donations or to pay any type of school fee. And this would allow them, well, one of the things we are also concerned about, as we all are concerned about, that's why we spaced out right now, we're concerned about COVID. And so you can imagine having to transfer monies from hand to hand, the child taking monies to the bookkeeper, so everybody's up very, very close. And so we're trying to provide every opportunity for parents to be convenienced and also for the safety of our staff. We're also providing annual professional development for all of our principals and bookkeepers, all of our athletic directors and coaches. And of course, this will be an ongoing process. We intend to meet with both principals and bookkeepers at the same time, because we want everybody to hear the same message. The same thing with our athletic directors and coaches. We want to make sure that everybody understands the financial procedures. And again, this will be ongoing year to year. As we have some highlights, we also have our challenges. One of those challenges is that Montgomery County provides the minimum allowable rate of ad valorem tax. I'm sure many of you have heard about, we receive what is called 10 mil taxes. 10 mils are the amount of excess tax that every school district have to receive. That's the minimum amount. Well, most school districts throughout the state of Alabama receive much more than the 10 mils, much more. In fact, I served as Chief Financial Officer at Birmingham City Schools for about 14 years, and their millage rate is about 28 mils. About 28 mils compared to our 10 mils. Huntsville City Schools is almost 30 mils now. So you can imagine the concerns that we have as it relates to our millage and our tax rate. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. We are also concerned about the district enrollment. The superintendent does have a plan so that we could begin to stabilize our student population. And that is huge as it relates to our state funding. As you know, because we only receive 10 mils, the current fund is not adequate to meet the demands, not just our capital program, but also our instructional programming. So we have to do better in that particular area. This is a chart that basically shows the decline in students over the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years. Again, we're working extremely hard to stabilize this loss of student population. This is something that the superintendent has been talking about. We have plans to kind of stop that and stabilize that situation. Every school district operates basically on 5 financial funds. First, there's the general fund. And the general fund pretty much accounts for all of the general operations of a school district. The general fund would consist of mainly state revenues and local revenues. I stated earlier that the state's foundation program is our largest source of funds. Therefore, those state foundation funds are part of our general fund. Property taxes, of course, the local property taxes, the 10 mills is part of our general fund. Sales taxes that we receive are also part of our general fund. Special revenue fund are basically our federal dollars. Now, the thing about federal dollars are there are very, very many restrictions regarding federal dollars. For example, let's say that we received $7 million in special ed monies. Well, we can only expend those funds on our special needs students. If we receive X number of dollars for career tech, those dollars can only be spent towards our career tech students. Or we receive maybe $15 or $17 million in child nutrition funds. Well, those monies could only be spent towards the feeding of our students. So there are restrictions as it relates to those federal dollars. Now, in special revenue funds also would include what is called local school public funds. Those local school public funds may include admissions to football games or basketball games, school-wide concessions. Those are all considered public funds. The thing about those public funds is those dollars could be used for the whole school. They are raised and collected for the entire school. Then we have the capital projects fund, and as you could guess, capital projects are mainly for the renovations of our schools, renovation and building of schools. The debt service fund for the payment of long-term debt. Because of our financial situation, of course, we usually transfer monies from the capital projects fund to our debt service fund to pay our long-term debt. And I'll talk about that in a second also. Lastly, we have the Fiduciary Fund, which is our non-public local school activity monies. Earlier, when I spoke about special revenue funds, where it says local school public funds, well, fiduciary fund is non-public funds, which means those monies are designated just for a particular club. For example, many of us, when we were in high school, may have been part of the FBLA club, or the science club, or the SGA club. So whatever monies are raised or derived from those clubs, those monies can only be expended for those particular students. So club funds can only be spent for the particular students in that particular club, where the public funds and special revenue could be spent for the entire student body. And there we have a display of our total operating budget for 2021. And we see that our general fund, we're projecting about $224 million. Now, we see about $164 million of that are state revenues, the state foundation program funds. As I stated, we project to receive about $147 million from the state's foundation program. Well, that's included in that $164 million. We also see about $56 million in local source funds. Most of those are the property taxes and sales tax dollars that we receive. So that would include those $10 million. Special revenue funds, mainly federal dollars, the child nutrition funds, the Title I funds, professional development Title II funds. Those monies have specific requirements, and as I stated, they're categorical in nature, and they require just very, very specific guidelines. The debt service fund, about $5 million, those monies are there to pay for long-term debt. Of course, when we look at capital projects fund of $43 million, we transfer about $5 million from the capital projects fund to the debt service fund to pay that long-term debt. So in actuality, we actually had about $48 million. We were projecting about $48 million in revenues in capital projects fund, but we're transferring $5 million to the debt service fund to pay long-term debt. And I'll explain that a little bit. The Expendable Trust Fund, again, those are those non-public activity monies at those local schools. The FBLA club, the science club, those various club monies that can be expended only for those particular students. And there again, we see that we're projecting a total budget of about $342 million. Again, a total budget of about $342 million, where the general fund would be about $224 million. Again, general fund, state revenues, and local revenues. Special revenue fund are mainly our federal dollars. Of course, they are categorical in nature. Debt service fund for the payment of long-term debt. Capital projects fund, $43 million. Now, let me just say something about the capital projects fund before I move on. Usually, the capital projects fund is usually about anywhere between $7 to $8 million. Many of you heard that during the previous legislative session, the legislature passed a bond issue. They passed a one-time bond issue. Well, Montgomery Public Schools will receive about $33 million from that bond issue. And of course, we'll use those monies to fix roofs and do some HVAC, flooring, and several other things that we have to do. But of course, we have over $250 million in deferred maintenance. So we can use so much more than that, but we are thankful to receive that $33 million to deal with some of our immediate needs. Again, Capital Projects Fund, I just spoke of that. Fiduciary Fund, again, are those club monies. FBLA Club, SGA, those specialized club funds derived at the local school. And then first we'll talk a little bit more about the general fund. Again, we have projected revenues of $224 million, projected expenditures of $220 million, and we are projecting an excess of revenues over expenditures. Of course, in the business where we'll just say profit. So we're expecting an increase of about $3.7 million from the beginning of the year. Okay, our general fund again includes our state revenues, $164 million, including in that are the foundation funds, again, the $147 million we'll receive from the state. Of course, also in that would be transportation dollars that we receive, over $7 million. Of course, we'll receive some called at-risk and several other funds that I'll speak about in a second. We also will receive in our general fund about $286,000. Those are basically ROTC funds from the Department of Defense. We do have ROTC programs in many of our high schools, and we want to continue to have those particular programs. So the federal government, they do provide about 40% of salaries and benefits towards the staffing of those ROTC teachers. The local funds, again, are our local tax revenues. The majority of it is local tax revenues. That would include those 10 mil property taxes and sales taxes. And there we see a pie chart of our total general fund. And let's note that 73.4% of our total general fund are state revenues. And I want us to keep that in our minds. 73.4% of our total funds are state revenues. 25.1% are local revenues. So, local revenues 25.1, state 73.4. What that says to me, when I look at other districts, is that we are too dependent on state funds. We are way too dependent on state funding. And what that means is that when proration pops up, or when there's some kind of hiccup in the economy, then you really don't have enough local dollars to really accommodate the needs. Now, fortunate, the state of Alabama passed what was called the state's proration bill, where they do have some money in that proration prevention account, and the state stabilization bill, where they do have some funds in that account to kind of help absorb against proration if it was to occur. However, it's up to every district and every citizenry to have some responsibility for its public schools. And that's the problem that we're facing here in Montgomery. When we look at Huntsville City Schools, we see Huntsville City Schools local revenues make up 45% of their total revenues. 45%. Again, Montgomery, as you see, 25%. We see Birmingham City Schools, 44% of their total general fund revenues or local revenues. So we see we have a big, huge problem there as it relates to local funding. And this is why we say that we got to do better than 10 meals, ladies and gentlemen. We have to do better than that. Now, the state funds school districts, pretty much all school districts, based on student population. That is the major driver for the funding of school districts. And that is basically the primary funding of the state's foundation program. And what the state does, they look at the number of students each school district have by grade level. For example, it may say from grades K through 3 or kindergarten through 3rd, for every 16 students, you will earn what is called 1 teacher unit. For grades 4 through 6, for every 20 students, you will earn 1 teacher unit. Grades 7 through 8, for every, let's just say 18 students, you receive 1 teacher unit. And then grades 9 through 12, for every 21 students, you'll receive 1 teacher unit. And what they mean by teacher units, the state have what is called a minimum state salary matrix. A minimum state salary matrix. So based on that minimum state salary matrix, they plot dollars on there and say, for example, let's say we earn, let's just say we have an elementary school that goes from grades K through 5, kindergarten through 5th. And let's say that in grades K through 3, you have 160 students. Kindergarten through 3, 160 students. And let's say you earn 1 teacher unit for every 16 students. Well, if I divide 160 into 16, what do I get? I get 10, right? So I would have earned 10 teacher units for that particular school for grades K through 3. And then the state will say, okay, based on those 10 teacher units you've earned, now you will get X number of dollars for the teachers' salaries and benefits. And they base that on the teachers' degrees and the teachers' years of experience. So in every grade level for every school, that's how they determine how much money we'll receive in the state's foundation program. Based on student population, from the student population we'll earn teacher units, and from the teacher units they plot dollars by those teacher units. For example, you may have the first year bachelor's degree may be $40,000. The 3rd year bachelor's degree may be $44,000. The 6th year or 8th year bachelor's degree may be a certain amount. Same thing with master's and doctorate. And that's how they would determine how much funding we'll receive by school per grade level for the district. Now, Montgomery has about 4% of the total student population. Almost 4%. So we receive close to 4% of the total state funding. And we want to notice that they say districts that provide more local support per pupil have the following advantages. Increased seasonal cash flow, but one of the bigger things are ability to employ more locally funded teacher units and ability to fund enhanced learning opportunities for students. And that is huge. That is where we would love the situation where we could have no more than 15, 16, 17 students in each class. We would love that opportunity that Huntsville and Birmingham have. That would be great. But because of those earned teacher units, we can't afford to do that. Now, what you have to keep in mind that although I'm saying you may earn 1 teacher unit for every 16 students, they don't take in consideration all those exploratory courses that a school must also have, electives that you also need. So that's why it is so hard for us to get down to less than 21, 25, 28 students per classroom. It's because of the funding mechanism. And that is also because the state also expect that the local citizenry will also support education to the point to help reduce those student class sizes. And as it relates to the fund and learning opportunities, you know, I talk to Dr. Moore about these things all the time. We talk about how wonderful it would be if we could provide foreign languages in all of our schools from middle school on up. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Yes. Or how we could provide, whether it's robotics or whatever it may be, in all of our middle schools. Those are some of the things that we would love to do if that local funding was available. Okay, so for FY 2021, we see that we lost about 745 students. Well, based on that loss of 745 students, we also lost teacher units. And you see that we lost about 42.5 teacher units because we have a drop in student population. And when you look at those other areas, we lost a total of about 44.03 units. That would cost the district over $4 million because of the loss of student population. That's why we're working diligently to do everything we possibly can to stabilize our student population, and that is huge. I stated earlier also that we will be required, in order to participate in the state's foundation program, we'll have to put up over $28 million of our local funds to participate in the state's foundation program. Well, after we put up our $28 million plus the $147 million we'll receive from the state, the total foundation program will be $175 million. Again, that's $147 million plus the $28 million that we would put up. It'll be $147 million. That is mainly to cover teacher salaries and benefits. So we see the amount budgeted for the salaries and benefits for fiscal year 2021. This is for teachers. And it's lost about $3.1 million. Fringe benefits, we see a loss of about $1.2 million. Other current expense, there was a little bit of increase there. Of course, other current expenses are dollars that we receive from the state to help pay for most of our support or classified employees. When I say support and classified employees, I'm talking about the bookkeepers, the secretaries, the custodians, the maintenance staff, all of those non-certified individuals. It's not nearly enough to cover all of those things, because I also included all of the utilities. All of those things have to be considered in OCE or other current expense also. That's why you have to have a good supply of local revenues to support education. Now, as stated, the $147 million is indeed the total amount that we will receive from the state for fiscal year 2021, $147 million. We see here $175 million when it says total foundation program. That includes the $147 million that the state will send us on a monthly basis. It'll be the $147 million divided by 12 on a monthly basis, plus the $28 million that we will have to put up out of our own local revenues. The state also provides some funding for a school nurse program. We'll receive about $1 million for our school nurse program. Now, let's keep in mind that we have over 52 schools, about 52 schools. It would be wonderful to have at least one nurse in every school. Well, we'll be able to do that this year because of the CARES money, the CARES Act money, or those federal stimulus dollars that we received as it relates to COVID. So that's helping us out this year. But we always need to keep in mind that that is a one-time funding source. So what about when COVID ends? What about these situations where you have to have a nurse at one in a school, but you may need an additional one for a kid that may have other severe illnesses? Because many times doctors may write in a prescription that a child must have nurses' attention at all times. I know we have, various tracheal services that we have to do. We have to change those things out. So it's several situations where, while we would like to have at least one nurse at every school, there are situations where we need 2 or 3 nurses at a particular school to work with our more severe needed students. We are provided a little bit of money towards our technology coordinator salary. Transportation. As you know, we have to transport students or provide students the opportunity to be transported to and from school each day. And this is for every child that is in a 2-mile radius. State requires us to transport those particular students. We receive about $8.5 million for transportation, but we lost about $705,000 from fiscal year 2020. And one of the things we also want to just make known as it relates to transportation funds are just to transport students to and from school. It's not for field trips. Can't use it for field trips. If we're going to provide field trips, then we have to go and ask parents, we need you to help fund this field trip. Athletic events, no athletic football teams or whomever, you're going to have to raise some money so that we can transport your football team to and from the games. Because those transportation dollars, it's not enough really to transport students to and from school. We have to also supplement those particular funds. But also those additional extracurricular items, then we have to ask parents and rely on parents to be able to transport those students. Fleet renewal dollars are dollars that are used to purchase school buses. And we receive about $7,739 per bus for every bus that is 10 years old or less. We receive $7,739 for every bus that is 10 years old or less. And that's how we receive fleet renewal monies to help purchase school buses. We have a bus fleet of about 200 buses, have a couple of hundred bus drivers, and we have a few buses in spare. At-risk funds, of course, those dollars are used to assist us with assisting those students who may be at risk of dropping out of school. And we definitely need some help there. Most of those monies right now are going towards our alternative school. And of course, there are other alternative programs. Dr. Williams right there she's our chief of service, and she works with all of our at-risk programs and all of our student services. And she talks about some of the other student at-risk programs that she would like to, of course, put before us, put in our district to assist us with keeping students in school and just work with those students that have other problems outside of just the instruction. Career Tech O&M, again, that's a little bit of money to help support our Career Tech program. Again, this shows our match. We're required to participate in the state's foundation program about $28 million to participate in the state's foundation program and to participate in the state's capital purchase program about $1.4 million. We'll receive again about $7.3 million in state capital purchase dollars. We'll be required to put up about $1.4 million in order to participate in the state capital program. And I thought this slide here was extremely important. And I'd like you all to go to this in your book so you can see it a little closer. Pam, what page is this slide on in the books? 47, okay. If you could turn to page 47, I just want to make a point on this particular slide. 27, okay, thank you. Let's look at Montgomery Public Schools. Let's look at the third line where it says total local revenues. And we see $56.2 million. Well, we will have to locally fund match to participate in the state's foundation program, $28 million. Therefore, that only leaves us $28 million of discretionary funds to do all of the other things we need to do. Whether it's to supply some schools with a few extra teachers, whether it's to help pay the power bill and the gas bill or whatever it may be. So it only leaves us $28 million. Let's look at Huntsville City Schools. Total local revenues, $103 million. $103 million. Local match, $27 million. So they have $76 million of discretionary funds compared to our $28 million in discretionary funds. Well, one may say, well, that's because Huntsville may have more kids. That's not the case. Montgomery has about 28,000 students. Huntsville City Schools have about 23,000 students. So we have 6,000 more students than Huntsville City Schools, and we have an extra $26 million for discretionary to do all those other things we have to do. Huntsville City Schools have 6,000 fewer students, and they have $76 million in discretionary funds to help meet all of their student needs. Let's look at Birmingham City. I'm going to skip Baldwin County because they do receive quite a bit of vacation money, so I just skipped them for a second, although they're comparable in size with us. Birmingham City Schools, 22,000 students. 22,000 students. They receive in local revenues $98 million, again compared to our $56 million. After their local match, Birmingham still have almost $70 million in discretionary funds, comparable to our $28 million. So we see the problem there then, don't we? We see why there's such a need for us to do a better job of supporting and funding our school district. The other areas of our general fund, as I stated, local federal revenues, most of that is ROTC dollars. We do have ROTC teachers at most of our high schools. We want to continue those ROTC programs. And of course, we see our local revenues of $56 million. Again, out of that $56 million, we have to put up $28 million of that to participate in the state's foundation program. And then we got other revenues of about $3.2 million, about $2.6 million indirect costs. What that is a small fee that our general fund access to our federal projects in order to manage those particular projects. All school districts also have basically 8 functional areas of expenditures. First, there's the instructional area of expenditures, or instructional services. Instructional services are mainly teachers' salaries and benefits, but it's also teacher materials and supplies, teacher equipment. Any and everything related to that teacher's ability to provide instructions to the students will be deemed instructional services. So, any and everything needed for that teacher to provide good instruction to the students are deemed instructional services. Then we have instructional support services. Instructional support services are mainly your principals, your assistant principals, your counselors, your librarians. These are the folk that help support the teachers so that the teachers could provide good instruction to our students. So instructional support will include reading coaches, all of those individuals that help provide some support to the teachers to provide instruction to the students. Also assistant principals. I did say counselors and librarians, right? And most of that would include those individual salaries and benefits, along with all the materials and supplies of those principals and counselors and librarians and social workers. All of those would be deemed instructional support services. Operation and maintenance, those would be expenditures related to keeping all of our schools, all of our buildings both clean, safe and secure, and comfortable. So that would include pretty much all of the custodial staff at every one of our schools and every one of our buildings. That would include our entire maintenance department. because all of them are concerned with keeping the building safe, clean. All of the security department, safe, clean, and secure and comfortable. All of the utilities, the power bill, we got air now. So that's part of keeping the building comfortable. So all of those would be considered operation and maintenance activities. Auxiliary services are mainly transportation services, and in special revenue fund, it is the child nutrition area. So in the general fund, auxiliary services or the transportation services. Capital outlay, again, basically capital renovation. The building of schools or the renovating of schools would be the easy way to explain that. Debt services, of course, the payment of long-term debt. We did acquire some long-term debt when Park Crossing was built. Of course, the city, I think it was the combination of the city and county that put together funding of that long-term debt on behalf of Montgomery Public Schools. Of course, some of those monies are retained now by the county. So other expenditures, activities or programs other than normally considered day school. That would be more like pre-K. It's kind of funny because in a lot of other states, pre-K is part of the normal course of study or the normal day school in a lot of other states. But in our state, of course, preschool is considered other because that's always going to be based on additional funding at the state's level. Also, any kind of extended day activities like before and after school tutoring, all those things would be deemed other expenditures. And there we see a breakdown of our total expenditures. We see instructional service at $134 million, instructional support at about $39.5 million. So that's about $174 million of everything towards instruction. So $174 million out of the $220 million basically show that the majority of our funding are going to support the classroom. And that's where we want our monies to go. We want to do everything we could to help provide instruction for our students. We also see operation and maintenance at about 25.6, not nearly enough. We have a very skeleton maintenance crew. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think we have, is it one plumber? I think we have one plumber, one electrician for the entire district, one electrician for the entire district. So you got 52 schools and you have one electrician. Those are some of the problems that we have as it relates to our local funding. And there we see a pie chart of a breakdown of our total funding. And again, I just want to notice that 79% of our total funding is going towards the classroom or going to support the classroom. One of the other things I want to point out, of course, we do see operation and maintenance and see its percentage of about 12%. But I want us to look at general administrative services. You know, when I got here to Montgomery, one of the first things I heard was that we were top heavy. We were top heavy. And so the superintendent looked at that, and we did make some adjustments in our administration. Where the State Department of Education states that administrative services shall not or should not exceed 5% of your total expenditures. General administrators should not exceed 5% of your total your total expenditures. And as you see, ours is 3%. So the things that this district has done and is getting done with the crew that it has, I think is amazing as it relates to its administrative staff. Just a recap of our general fund for 2020, and let me just clarify that our fiscal year runs from October 1st through September 30th. Therefore, fiscal year 2020 runs from October 1st of 2019 to September 30th of 2020. That's our 2020 fiscal year, October 1st of 2019 through September 30th of 2020. Therefore, fiscal year 2021, which is what we're doing this budget hearing on, will run from October 1st of 2020 through September 30th of 2021. Again, fiscal year 2021 will run from October 1st of 2020 through September 30th of 2021. So right now we are still in fiscal year 2020. At September 30th, that will be the last day of fiscal year 2020. So we just want to do a little recap what our projected fund balance will be at the end of fiscal year 2020. We began fiscal year 2020 with a fund balance of about $19.6 million. We're projecting an increase in our fund balance of almost $8 million for fiscal year 2020. And that is huge, that is amazing. That speaks to what the superintendent has done and what our board has done in recognizing that we needed to reduce much of our expenditures. Now I have to also say that we did take advantage of a lot of other things, because when COVID hit, a lot of the operational expenditures that we were incurring did go down quite a bit. So that did play a part in that also. But it also is because of what the superintendent and the board did as it related to reducing the expenditures. So we're projecting an increase in our fund balance of almost $8 million. And we are projecting to end fiscal year 2020 with about $27.6 million. That's $27.6 million. Now our fund balance requirement for fiscal year 2020, actually that should be about $18.8 million. I see it's 18.1. It's about $18.8 million is our fund balance requirement for fiscal year 2020. So we still will have almost about $8 or $9 million beyond what the state requires of us in our fund balance. So it shows the responsibility that this district has shown over the last few years. Now, what are our projections in our fund balance for fiscal year 2021? We see that we're projecting total revenues again of $224 million. And there it goes right there. The total general fund revenues are $224.3 million. And we're projecting total expenditures of about $220 million, which is right there, a total expenditure of $220 million. And we're projecting an increase in our fund balance of about $3.7 million for 2021. So total expenditures about $220 million, comparable to total revenues of $224 million. And we are projecting an increase in our fund balance of about $3.7 million. And we are projecting to end fiscal year 2021 with about a $27.6 million. No, I meant $31.3 million. The fund balance at the beginning of the year, $27.6 million, plus our excess or our increase would take us to $31.3 million is what we're projecting to end fiscal year 2021. The state required fund balance for 2021 will be about $18.3 million. That's the amount that the state requires us to have as a 1 month fund balance. So you see that we projected to end fiscal year 2021 with almost a $13 million over what the state requires. And again, that speaks to our board and our superintendent for the many difficult decisions that they had to make over these past 2 years. Next, I'd just like to just briefly talk about the special revenue fund again. Special revenues are mostly our federal dollars. Our federal dollars, as stated, are categorical in nature and have to be expended for specific priorities. Child nutrition funds have to be expended for the feeding of the children. Special ed funds have to be expended for our special needs students. So we want to keep that in mind. And there we see we are projecting a total budget of about almost $69 million in special revenue funds. We see state of $127,000. That is mainly a little small grant that the district receives on behalf of our local schools. Also, federal, about $60.70 million. That is the child nutrition funds that I'm speaking of, the special needs funds, career tech funds. Of course, local, about $4.8 million. Those are our local school public funds. It also would include a few dollars that our child nutrition department collects from the sale of additional salads or some other food item that's not part of the regular menu. And then, of course, other revenues and fund sources. We are required to transfer from our general fund monies to help support the child nutrition program. We have to pretty much help pay for the benefits, the salary benefits of our child nutrition program. So that's also additional monies that comes out of our general fund besides the match that we have to do for capital projects and for the state foundation program. And there we see a pie chart of our our special revenue fund. Of course, we see 88% are our federal dollars, and we see the breakdown of the remaining revenues. And this is a comparison of the amount of federal dollars we received last year compared to this year. We do see an increase of about $17 million. And I kind of want to talk about that for a second. Of course, we did receive about almost $300,000 increase in our Deer Part B special ed funds and about $2.23 million in Title I. I think what the federal government was doing because of COVID, it really attempted to put some monies in the hands of school districts to help support those students. Of course, not enough, but we were thankful that we did receive some funding to help support our students. One of the ones I really want to point out is the CARES money. You see $10.6 million. Of course, those are those federal stimulus dollars. Now we're projecting, we are basically receiving in all from CARES about $20 million. But we're projecting to expend about $10 million of that in this current year, in fiscal year 2020. Because we have got over 15,000 Chromebooks and laptops and all of those things for our students. We had to build up infrastructure to be able to take care of our students. We provided nursing services and all of the PPE equipment that's been put in the schools. Our schools are receiving thorough cleanings, and our maintenance staff and our logistics staff just have done an amazing job of keeping our schools both safe and clean. And we really, really are appreciative to them. So we spent millions of dollars on PPE, supplies, and equipment, and we're constantly, and I mean constantly, going into these schools and cleaning these schools and buildings. Again, you see the couple of grants that we receive in state revenues in our special revenue. Also the local, as I stated, most of that is local school public funds. Those are the dollars that the local school makes through fundraisers or through admissions, through basketball games or football games, sale of concessions and so forth. Other fund source, the CMP pass-through, those are the dollars that we have to transfer to our child nutrition fund to help pay for some of the salary benefits of the CMP employees or the child nutrition food service employees. And there we see a breakdown of our expenditures for special revenue. And we again see about $39 million going towards instruction. We see $25 million for instructional services. That may be additional teachers and teacher supplies, any and everything related to that teacher providing instruction to those students. Instructional support services over close to $15 million. Basically, additional assistant principals, librarians, counselors, nurses, just a little bit of additional individuals to help us in this educational process. Operation and maintenance, of course, we know what that is. Auxiliary, that would be food service. That's child nutrition services. So as I stated, the auxiliary services is transportation in the general fund, but in the special revenue fund, it's child nutrition or food services, the feeding of our students. And then we see a little bit for general administrative and so forth. Other expenditures are mainly more so pre-K and extended day opportunities or tutoring, those kinds of services, before and after school tutoring. And there we see a pie chart of our total expenditures in the special revenue fund. Projected fund balance for the special revenue, of course, total revenues, we're projecting again almost $69 million. Total expenditures, about $68 million. We're projecting an excess of revenues over expenditures of $745,000. Of course, that $745,000 would be mainly monies made by the local schools. A little bit from child nutrition too, but mainly the local schools. So we're expecting, again, that excess of $745,000 fund balance, beginning of the year about $7 million. So we're projected to end fiscal year 2021 with a fund balance in our special revenue fund of about $7.8 million. Again, this $7.8 million are child nutrition and local school funds. Next, debt service fund. Again, these are dollars that are used to pay long-term debt. We do have long-term debt that we're paying, some bond issues that was taken out in order to build and renovate some schools years ago. And you see it says revenues derived from internal transfer from the capital projects fund. As I stated, in all, we were projecting about $48 million total in our capital projects fund. But of course, we are transferring about $5 million from capital projects to debt service to pay down the long-term debt. Then we have our capital projects fund. From the state, we'll receive about $37 million. As I stated, out of that $37 million, about $33 million is from that one-time bond issue that the state approved. Our state legislature approved in the last legislative session. So we're very, very, very thankful to the legislature for approving that one-time bond issue. In fact, I don't think one had been approved in I don't know how many years. So this is a tremendous assistance to school districts to take care of so much deferred maintenance expenditures, so deferred capital outlay expenditures. We need a lot more because, as I stated, we have over $250 million in deferred maintenance. But this $30 million will help us take care of just a couple of our immediate needs. Now, it won't help us take care of all of the immediate needs, but it will help us with a few of them. And so we're very, very thankful for that. That also includes what is called fleet renewal dollars. Those are also in the capital fund. The $4.7 million there, those are dollars that we're projecting to receive from the state's insurance fund. I think many of you all remember when BTW burned down. Well, we received some of those dollars from the state, but some of those dollars you can't get until you really start doing most of the construction on that school. We're projecting to go ahead and try to take care of most of that school this upcoming year, in fiscal year 2021. So we're projected to go ahead and get or receive the other $4.7 million in BTW funds for BTW. The $1.3 million is that local match to participate in the state's capital projects fund. So that's about $43 million. We're projecting to spend the grand majority on that money on capital outlay, the $46 million on capital outlay. And that's at many of our buildings doing roofing and HVAC and plumbing and several other things that need to be done. Again, just wanted to point out that the $5 million is are transferred from our capital projects fund to our debt service fund in order to pay the debt service bills. We're projecting that we'll have a beginning fund balance at the end of fiscal year 2020 of about $9.5 million. And we're projecting that we're going to expend all of the $43 million plus the $9.5 million, and we'll have an ending balance of about $1.4 million at the end of the year. We are planning on, with that $33 million, to take care of a lot of our immediate needs. We're also planning on really moving on BTW. So that's why you see only a $1.4 million remaining in the capital projects fund. Again, not enough to do all of the things we need to do, but it does help. Expendable trust fund are basically local school club monies, SGA club or FBLA club. Those are those club monies that we're projecting that the schools will raise. And of course, they'll probably spend most of it on some of the things they want to do, the clubs chooses to do. And we're projecting an increase of about $48,000. And they'll end the year with about $642 million. And again, this is our total operating budget. I just want to point out just the fund balance. We see we're projecting a beginning fund balance in our general fund at about $27.6 million. We're projecting an increase in general fund after the year ends at September 30th, 2021. We're projecting to have an ending fund balance of about $31.3 million. In special revenue, mostly federal dollars, we're projecting to begin the year with about $7 million and ending the year with about $7.8 million. Debt service is more so a transfer in the payment of those that long-term debt principal and interest. The capital projects, we're projecting to begin the year with about $9.5 million and ending the year with about $1.4 million. Expendable trust, of course, that's those class activity monies, plan on ending the year with about $642,000. And there's a pie chart of our total budget with all funding sources. And now, Madam President, if it's okay, we can open the floor for questions if anyone have any questions.
Any questions?
Yes, ma'am. Sure. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll get it to you. Yes, ma'am. Okay. I can't hear you.
Give her the mic.
Okay. Sure. In fact, for the most part, those CARES monies are for ensuring that our schools are sanitized, that we have appropriate social distancing, and that we're doing all of the other things needed to keep both teachers and students safe. And I know, Madam Superintendent, that you have our operations director doing a lot of things as it relates to sanitizing schools and doing several other things throughout our buildings. Let me address the one first about the class sizes first. You don't know how much I want to see us have a teacher to 14 or 15 students too. I want that so bad, I really do. But the only way Montgomery is going to be able to do that is by having more local support, where we can have more locally funded teacher units. That is the only way that can. Every school district, when you look at these other school districts throughout the state, they have that local support where they're able to do that. And that is a goal for us to do. So I'm just appealing to you and to the entire public that we got to vote yes for this tax. Otherwise, many of the same problems and same problems that we have with some of these buildings, it'll persist. Actually, it'll get worse. So you're absolutely right. That is indeed SAC's guidelines, and we definitely want to follow those. But of course, we are going to need some support to be able to do that. Kim, is that something that you could add to that, or that you want to add to that? Okay.
Mr. Watts,
Yes, ma'am.
if I could just say one thing about this. I'm at a school right now. I've been teaching since August 10th, and that's just the high school that I teach at. I'm also at a college. Our kids have come back. They take their temperature every time they walk in that school, every time they walk out of that school. If they walk out for a break, their temperature, my temperature, everybody's temperature is taken 5 to 10 times a day while they're there. Once they get in class, they come into a clean school because it's been fogged, everything else, just like they talked about last week or this past Tuesday. We have that. We have a kit. Those kids have to wipe down their desk. When they get there, it's already been done, and when they leave, between each class, we hang out a little thing on our door, a little green tag that says it's done, which means we can then switch classes. We've had one COVID case, which sent kids home for, they went ahead and did 2 weeks. It's working. And I mean, I think a lot of it, are there going to be little problems? But going back face to face, me teaching it and me being a teacher, it is a teacher's nightmare to do remote and to teach in class. Honestly, their salary should be doubled. I'm up till 2 and 3 o'clock at night just doing my high school stuff. So some of this is fear, and I think once we get back in the class, there's nothing like face to face. That face-to-face, I am grading the remote. My remote learners, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, the average that they have is a 60. Those are the remote, because they have to teach themselves, and they're not. Their parents are at work. And I've encouraged parents, please bring them back. Yes, it would help me. But when you grade a remote, you're grading a remote to be right or wrong. It's not a check or check minus or check plus. At least it's not for me and won't be. You're going to learn more in that classroom face-to-face, one-on-one. And they do need to be back there. They do need to be back in class today. It's working. We're a month today. We started August 10th. We're at September 10th. I know that may make teachers mad. I didn't like when I went, but I take my little vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, everything you can take every day before I go. I got an email on that today.
But this is excuse me, this is not a budget issue. We have a really good plan, and if you have not heard it, well, we're doing.
And I just gave you an instant of it really happening, okay? Mine is not on paper, okay? I have kids walking into my class saying, Dr. Keith, were these cleaned? And they will clean it regardless because they don't want it. It's working if you'll just watch it work. Instead of sitting, it's more than just on paper. I'm living proof of what's going on right now because I'm in the trenches working in it.
And we,
Bring them back. They need to get back to budget. Bring them back to budget.
I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, I have to do my own
Well,
quick
let
care
me
package.
just say,
Okay.
let me just say,
I do my own paper towels.
let's get back to our budget. We do have funds appropriated for that,
Yes,
and a plan.
And that's what I wanted to say, that we do have line items in that care, in that care funding source, a line item for additional custodians and cleaning services and PPEs, supplies, equipment. We have line items in there for all of that. We wanted to make sure that we had a adequate amount in there for that. And it also provides us the opportunity, based on need, but we can transfer from one line item to another. So if we see we need more in a particular line item, then we'll transfer from another line item to the line item to take care of those particular needs. Yes, safety is pretty much the priority as it relates to this particular situation. So we do have that in the budget. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Watts, thank you. What a great budget
Thank
meeting.
you.
Dr. Moore?
Thank you. Let me just add, Mr. Watts always does a wonderful job and has been since he's been here the last couple of years. And working with his team is really a joy. He has some ideas that are really, really great. Sometimes I have harebrained ideas, but they work also. So we work together to try to make them come out. So I want to add one little thing. Since we had this little bit of a discussion about the budget, let me say this. The money for what you're talking about is in the budget. So that the budget item is taken care of. If there's an implementation issue, then we'll deal with that otherwise. Budgeting wise, the money's there. For the products, the machines, anything that we need, if something pops up, because it's always a moving target with COVID. If it pops up and we have to address it, then we will. But the money is in the budget, which is what we're talking about tonight. It's there. Now, implementation wise, we have to make sure that those things work when we get into a classroom. So that's where we have to deal with that area of operations and to make some corrections if we have to make them. All right? So at this point, I want to make a recommendation. I want you, as a board, I'm recommending that you approve the FY 2021 budget.
A second.
Is there any discussion further with us? All in favor signify by raising your hand. And we have unanimous. Before we adjourn, I'd just like to once again thank Mr. Watts. This is a remarkable budget because you've paid such close attention to every detail. And it is balanced, and it'll be on time. And we're going to stick to it unless we can save some money somewhere along the line. When compared to last year's budget, it's improved. It's lean and mean, and we're going to make the most out of every dollar for student improvement. So kudos to Mr. Watts and to Dr. Moore for tending to our financial affairs at MPS. Were it not for their little eagle eyes on things, we caught some crooks who stole from our children in the past. And while this is really odd for me to say, I look forward to this coming year's audit because I have confidence it will be clean. We're finally at a point where I hope the public understands that we are watching every penny and can be trusted with new funds. There will be a referendum coming up in a couple of months, and I hope you're going to agree with me on that point. Unless there's any further business from any of you ladies, the next meeting will be Tuesday, October 13th, and it will be at Carver High School. We are adjourned.
Okay, well, that was short and sweet.
Here in the morning, so y'all keep tabs.
I know.